Okay, awesome. Manhattan Borough President Gale Brewer, thank you so much for taking the time to join me on Life Before the Virus.
Thank you.
And you're very busy running around, especially today. We're reopening the city. Today's June 22nd, the beginning of phase 2.
Yeah. So what we did this morning was we went to George's Restaurant, which is at 89 Greenwich Street in the heart of the financial district. And it's a family-owned restaurant. It's been there for many years. And we were there at 8 o'clock. We had ABC, CBS, some radio, some other reporters. It was my husband, me, and Jessica Lappin, who is president of the Downtown Alliance. We were the only ones, but we were the first to be served breakfast. George's has a wonderful outdoor cafe, so they didn't have to deal with, expanding it or going into the street. And it was very special because he's a beloved entrepreneur. His father had the restaurant, and now he does. And we were saying, Jessica Lappin and I were saying, New York is open for business. It's going to be slow, but it's going to be slow and steady. And this particular restaurant had a 9/11 swamped. They were out of business for quite some time. And so they're, I don't know if the word is familiar, but they unfortunately used the blackouts, and they also had, of course, the horrible Hurricane Sandy. They've had everything in that restaurant, but They're still going. And it was a wonderful way to say, welcome, phase 2. We had delicious eggs and coffee and orange juice for breakfast. And the waiters could not have been nicer. So I think everybody was happy. And then the ABC crew had breakfast, and there were a lot of them. So that was special. And then regulars started coming in, and everybody, they had put, I think either glass or plywood between the different tables. Mm-hmm. So it felt very safe. And of course, you're outdoors, and it's on a fairly quiet street, probably too quiet, to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. The only people passing by on the sidewalk, I have to be honest, were construction workers. I didn't see any. I don't think in 2 hours or an hour and a half I ever saw a worker. So yeah. It's going to be a slow, and they were, as far as I could see, the only restaurant open for dining in that area. So that's why I selected them. I wanted to have something that felt like it needed to be open.
I've heard from other restaurants that stayed open where their neighboring restaurants had not, were doing really well during COVID with takeout and delivery.
I think the people I talked to would do, 20%, 30% max of what they usually do though. Mm-hmm. So I think it kept in some cases, the staff on, but I didn't hear really well. Maybe you did, but I think it was still rough considering what they're used to. Yeah, when they still, sometimes you can negotiate with the owner, but somebody still has to pay the property taxes. So there's a lot of money at stake.
And now moving forward, the governor says that he'll shut down businesses that don't comply with the social distancing regulations. How do we balance the interests of the business owners that want to be opening to full capacity at some point with the public health and safety of New York City?
Well, he's talking primarily about the bars. I was over the last couple of weekends, I've been in Lower East Side. I've been on 9th Avenue and 51st Street. I've been other places, I can't remember, but definitely trying to make people socially distance, make them do it, wear a mask. We've been giving out masks. I think the way that we opened in phase 1 and phase 2 is challenging because yes, you can take out a drink, you can take out food, but there's no place to sit. Mm-hmm. So people just gathered, and it was actually frightening, to be honest with you, because on the Lower East Side in particular, nobody had a mask on, and there were hundreds and hundreds of people. The second night, the Saturday night of that fiasco, we did call, and they were very responsive and very respectful, NYPD, and they came in force and did get people to scatter. Nobody was arrested. Nobody had to deal with the SLA, but it was really scary. So I hope that doesn't happen anymore, because now people can do outdoor seating. but it's a challenge. The best of all would be a reservation and then outdoor seating, because you also have to deal with, I don't know what's going to happen on the weekend with a line.
Right.
So these are really challenging times, and it's not until phase 3 really where we can, or July, which is fairly soon, but where the restaurant can go into the street and take over a street. And all of that is being worked out. DOT is trying, but it's hard, you know, to make all that work. But I'm advocating more streets closed so the restaurants can open. And I know that if you're on a bike lane or a bus lane, you can in fact take the parking space if you can get the cars to move and use that as your opening street in terms of tables and chairs and put up barricades. But this is all hard on the restaurants. And talking to the restaurateur this morning, he says it's, you know, it's going to be hard on a lot of restaurants. In Manhattan, they pay a lot of rent. And so the prices are high. It's hard. And I want them to succeed so much, the restaurants.
Right. So transitioning now to all the Black Lives Matter stuff that's been going on. And I know that you have been out there advocating for Black lives, and many folks have been advocating for the government to defund the police. And when I spoke with Brooklyn Borough President Eric Adams on my show, he said it's not about defunding the police, it's about rethinking how we do law enforcement. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how we can get along with the police and move forward.
I agree with the borough president of Brooklyn. I work and have for 40 years, 35 years, worked with NYPD through many jobs, city council and before. And I think that when I don't mind cutting some of their budget. Even police officers at the highest level say they could lose some of their budget, to be honest with you. And if it goes towards youth programming, that's important. So I'm 100% for that. That's not defunding. That's just cutting the budget and cutting it perhaps even similar to what other agencies are being asked. Then the question is, what and how does NYPD operate? So there's a discussion about moving out transportation, transit cops, and the school officers, known as SSA, school safety. I think that needs to be looked at carefully. The school safety, you know, they're trained by NYPD, but as you know, DOE doesn't have the best reputation either. So making sure that, you know, maybe changing the way that they do their job, that would have to have some discussion. In terms of the traffic, I am agnostic about it, whether it's the Department of Transportation or NYPD, somebody still needs to direct traffic. But then the issue for NYPD is the following. Who's gonna handle? And I agree with Eric Adams and others, if we could have more cure the violence groups. In Manhattan, we only have 2. We have one in East Harlem, and we have one in Central Harlem. So we only have 2 in the entire borough. So these groups are really effective. But if we're going to deal with quality of, we need more of those groups to deal with young people, to find alternatives to incarceration, to try to do prevention, to try to get people jobs, get people into schools, get away the guns, the firecrackers, whatever it is. But now the problem is, what about the homeless, the quality of life, the noise, the construction, you know, all those issues where the public just calls NYPD. Mm-hmm. And at least in Manhattan, these are probably the majority of the calls, to be honest with you. So as higher up officers at NYB tell me, people are still gonna call us. If we're not in charge of the homeless, and we're not in charge of noise, and we're not in charge of this, that, and the other, we're still gonna get called, and what are we gonna do? So I think all of this needs to be discussed. But if we had more and funded cure the violence groups, like the 2 that we have in Manhattan now, I will be very happy, because they are extremely excellent, extremely responsive and great at what they do.
Are those city groups or nonprofit organizations?
They're a nonprofit group. Yeah, it's Street Corner Resources in Central Harlem, and the group in East Harlem, I can get you the name of, but they're excellent. They've been around for a long time. They mostly focus on people coming out of incarceration, but they have also been funded now to work with young people in these homes.
Yeah, I agree. I think we do need to see more organizations like that.
Yeah.
And on the topic of gun violence, even today there were some articles about the increased incident of shootings now since COVID, and with the courts closed, there's less prosecution. So
Right.
is that the solution as well, to fund these nonprofit organizations to deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, we've been talking about gun violence forever, right? I think there's a 25% increase, if I remember. We've been talking about this. Um, this is a national issue because if you can buy a gun in Virginia and buy a gun in Florida, then you're going to bring it north, right? So
Mhm.
if we don't have, all of these loopholes closed, the gun show, the mental health, all of that has to be closed. Until then, I don't know what we're going to do because everybody can get a gun. So the answer to your question is yes, these groups can work to try to make sure that young people don't have a gun or that anybody has a gun that they shouldn't. But until those loopholes are closed, I think it's an uphill battle. So I'm hoping that in the fall, when there's an election, that might change because we're not going to get these kinds of laws until we have a different administration in Washington.
Yeah, it is kind of scary. I mean, between now and the fall, there could be even more gun violence.
Well, that's why you need to cure the violence groups to have a relationship with young people and talk to, as they do, wear masks, socially distance. These are your peers telling you that, and get rid of the gun. Some of the buybacks haven't been able to be held either. Buy back the gun
Right.
because of COVID. They're not incredibly um, successful in terms of getting guns off the street, but it helps. I mean, they pay only $200, which some people think is not enough. And also usually it's your friend's grandfather's friend's gun, as opposed to something that's going to be used for a terrible thing.
Hmm. And now, with the issue of racism, Manhattan's a very progressive place, but systemic racism exists. And what are your thoughts on how we can combat that?
Well, I mean, it's something that I have, you know, been aware of for a very long time with family and friends. So I would say this sort of like, I think it's really impressive that the protesters have gotten some traction because this is not, this is not a new ism. And I think that the challenge now, in my opinion, is to not just, we're going to be painting Black Lives Matter downtown and uptown. So that's all taking place.
Okay.
But for me, it's all about increasing the budget for the City University of New York, for CUNY. That's an example where I teach there, so I know how great those students are and how little support they have, right? It's all about figuring out how the Department of Education can really help our young people to learn. That to me is a racist, get rid of issue, just like CUNY. And even things like for the immigrant, let's hope DACA holds up in terms of the Supreme Court, but also just having, in order to get people jobs, because it's all about jobs, jobs, jobs. To me, having more programs that help people get jobs. There's a lot of talk, but action is a different story. Those are just some, and of course we have to get rid of the health disparities. They're huge. They're so huge. Just having a health center that's open more often, that addresses your needs, that goes to you, and so you having to come to it, and just doing what the healthy foods in the neighborhood, as the borough president and I have been talking about forever. Brooklyn and Manhattan borough presidents, we've been talking about this healthy food forever. I can tell you so many locations where fast foods exist more than fresh food.
Right.
So all of this is part of, to me, getting rid of the racist perseverance in our culture. It's a little bit different, perhaps, in terms of my agenda than others. I agree, we got to work with the police department, take down some statues, but for me, these other issues should also be high, and there are other ones on the agenda.
Mm-hmm. I do think COVID came at an interesting time. It allowed for everyone who was unemployed to hit the streets and protest. It was sort of a perfect storm of circumstances.
Yeah. No, I agree. And it's, it's young and old. I've been to so many marches, so I know sort of the demographics. I think about 9% that apparently came from out of town. So that's not a big percentage. I thought it would be higher. That's what I understand, heard secondhand. So there's a lot of New Yorkers, which is also fabulous, who are marching. And yes, people are out of work. And let's hope that we can get jobs. Like I said, I was just at the opening of a restaurant in terms of their outdoor service. And as I told you, I didn't see any workers walking by. So it's frightening in terms of our economy, our healthcare, and of course, trying to get rid of the racist bias in our society. These are big issues.
Right, they're big issues. So thank you for all you do for Manhattan and for being out there advocating for us, Gale.
Well, congratulations on 55 shows. That's pretty cool.
Thank you.
And it's really fun to listen to different stories, I'm sure, about what people are doing or thinking. It's quite a collection now.
It is. The show began life before the virus to talk about the differences in your role now versus before the virus. But because it's been so long, it's really about everything. It's impacted every single person in every single industry in every way. So, yes.
Yeah, we have to worry about housing. Too. That's the other big challenge, because as soon as those courts open, those owners are going to be out there saying, "We haven't paid the rent. How am I going to pay the rent if I don't have a job?" So all of those, that's the other issue that's going to come to the fore. And we're trying so hard to be sure that we have legal aid available.
Yeah, and hopefully everyone.
Thank you. I love being number 55. That's very cool.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much. And hopefully everyone will go out and vote tomorrow to make a change and people become more civically engaged now.
Yes, absolutely vote and do your census.
Yes, the census.
And fill out your census. That's so important. We're trying hard to get the numbers up because they're not up. So we're trying very hard to do that. Thanks for reminding me.
Yep. Thank you. Have a great day.
All right. Take care. Nice to see you. Take care.
You too. Bye.